academic institutions ahead of next week's back to school. Zimbabweans are donating blood to health facilities as the country to strengthen the country's blood bank. Congolese at home and in the diaspora have demanded the destruction of a statue of the former Belgian colonial king. This and more coming on The World Today. Many thanks for joining us. You are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV. I am Amadou Kante, and now the news in detail. Now, the Ministry of Health, together with partners, began the fumigation exercise of all academic institutions ahead of the reopening of examination classes of the upper basic school system across the country. Facilities at the University of the Gambia were among those targeted for the disinfection activity on Thursday as the academic institutions brace up for the end of semester examinations next week. Here's more details of that in this report.
As schools in the Gambia gear up for the continuation of the 2020 academic year, the Ministry of Health and the Gambia Red Cross Society have deployed teams to fumigate all learning institutions, starting with those in the Greater Banjul areas on Thursday. The decision to reopen schools came following government's decision to ease COVID-19 restrictions to allow the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to recall teachers and students back to the classroom. The primary target has to deal with those in the transitional classes in the upper basic school, whose trial will determine the reopening of the rest of the academic streams across the country. The Gambia Red Cross Society began the fumigation exercise with the University of the Gambia ahead of the scheduled end of semester examination next week. Ibrahima S. Jiba described the disinfection activity as routine in areas hit by the outbreak of the disease.
But our comment here already have linkage with the University of the Gambia. So that one we are doing the Brikama campus and also the MDI campus here. So, but as you know, they are trying to maximize the interaction of students or to minimize the interaction of students. So they are doing social distancing examination, whereby students will be distancing one another. So on that note, so they may not, this place may not be sufficient. The law faculty and MDI is not sufficient for their students. Now they included those comprehensive, which will be used also for their examination. So we fumigate that place also, so that they can occupy the spaces for their examination. We are using a chemical called chlorine. So chlorine-based chemical is been used as the disinfectant since during the outbreak of Ebola and also during any other outbreak that you know, because it is highly recommended by WHO and CDC that it is effective if you use it on surfaces whereby you think it's contaminated, or the places which are contaminated, it can decontaminate the place. So this is why we are using the chlorine-based to disinfect the grounds.
The outbreak of the COVID-19 global pandemic led to the abandonment of educational institutions across the country, leading to security concerns in certain areas, as attested by Aidan Jai, Director of Region 4 Education Directorate.
When this state of emergency was declared, our school head, I don't know about other regions, but in Region 4, what we realized was that most of these principals and head teachers just abandoned their schools. And we had reported cases of theft, we had reported cases of damaged property, damaged school fence and, neglected gardens, all that. So when we went down, we saw that some schools, most of these schools were neglected. They were not being taken care of. Although there is water in some schools, but then schools were neglected and we needed to do something.
With the easing of restrictions, the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education mobilized efforts in consideration of the safety of students and teachers ahead of the reopening of schools. Director of Health Education and Promotion at the Ministry of Health, Modunjai informed MOPSI during a stakeholder meeting on Tuesday that mass screening will be required for students and teachers once the classrooms are reopened.
Also consider, are we also able to screen all students and children that and staff that come to the school on a regular basis? If we are able to do that, then we can also open. These are some of the questions that have also been raised. And the other thing is about, are there recommended health and safety actions in place in school? Like hand washing facilities. I mean, you talk about, somebody talk about the sanitizers. Perhaps sanitizers might be expensive, but having a hand washing facility like a tank with water supply in a water facility, water inside, plus some detergent inside it, I think that will be more costly because we are dealing with large numbers of children at school. So we can also think about that. Let's think of applying and use cost-effective and sustainable interventions that will also help us to move the agenda forward. That's also very important. We also need to think about that.
The move to fumigate learning facilities and other mechanisms is in compliance with guidelines from health authorities, expected to convince parents to allow their children back to school. For iAfrica News, I am Juldenjai Suare.
And from the report there, next we head to Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe is faced with blood scarcity amid the impact of COVID-19, where the number of blood donors are out to remedy the situation. Well, the country relies heavily on imported blood to support patients, but due to the limited movements of goods and services, many health facilities are left in center of blood shortage. Health workers are hopeful that the latest offer would go a long way in improving the challenging situation in health centers. Here's more details of that.
A small prick begins a flow of blood which could be the difference between life and death for some.
If you think about it, this is one of the only ways you can actually save someone's life without doing a lot. Like you don't actively have to do anything, but the effects are incredible.
But recently, donors haven't been able to give blood and the equipment to process it has been held up.
Due to COVID-19 and the limited cargo services, we had our critical consumables which were coming from outside the country and got delayed for about 2 weeks. And this greatly affected us because the consignment that we were expecting was carrying like things such as the test kits, which are very critical. Without them, you're not able to test for the blood.
Deliveries to public hospitals have been suspended, endangering some patients like delivering mothers who may need transfusion.
The stocks are limited. So you find that the stock which is available may be for very, very critical cases. But now because the consumables have come in, we should see that improving now because we're able to then improve in terms of our supply. And eventually maybe in the coming week we are back at, above 90% or so supply of blood to the hospitals.
Zimbabwe is also keen to shore up a dwindling number of blood donors. These are the names of centurions, people who've made 100 blood donations or more. To reach this milestone requires at least 25 years, and so that's why the National Blood Service is always reaching out to younger donors and is now being encouraged to use the platforms on which they are most active.
A lot of kids spend time on social media and stuff like that. I think if there was advertising done on there, it wouldn't. So maybe even if it didn't attract new people, it would remind people like me and my friends who have done it before that, hey, it's been a while. Why don't you come by and give blood? And, you're always scrolling through Instagram. Seeing something like that would remind you, I think.
A revamped outreach plan will also see the blood service go into rural areas to attract new donors.
From the report there in Zimbabwe, next we report on matters, of course, between China and Africa. Also, that's in Africa-China relations. The cause in efforts to combat the coronavirus global pandemic. Well, world leaders convened a meeting held via video link on Wednesday, dubbed Extraordinary China-Africa Summit on Solidarity Against COVID-19. Nearly 8 million cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed globally and more than 445,000 reported deaths. Despite the effects of COVID-19, leaders believed that countries have formidable tasks of combating the virus while stabilizing the economy and protecting people's livelihood. Let's have more details of that in this report.
The extraordinary China-Africa Summit on Solidarity Against COVID-19 wrapped up on Wednesday with highlights of the need to uphold relations and multilateralism in bringing the global pandemic under control. The President of the People's Republic of China, Presidents of African countries, the United Nations and the World Health Organization called for global solidarity to combat the COVID-19 pandemic in a joint communique issued after a virtual extraordinary summit. According to the communique, the world leaders reaffirmed deep concern over the unprecedented and consequent challenges posed by the global spread of the COVID-19, especially its impact on the lives of the African people. The chairman of the African Union, Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa, said the pandemic demands solidarity, global cooperation and collaboration.
To President Xi and the government and the people of China for their generous donations of various diagnostic as well as therapeutic medical equipment. As the countries of Africa, we have acted decisively and in unison to respond to the threat of COVID-19.
The AU established an African COVID-19 Response Fund as a key intervention to mobilize and direct resources towards the continent's response to this challenge. However, the economic global turndown has dealt a severe blow to the African continent as it has to the rest of the world. The AU chairman urged China to respond to Africa's call on the international community to avail some unused special drawing rights of around $100 million for Africa to provide additional liquidity to shore up the private sector. President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, who co-chaired the extraordinary China-Africa Summit, urged that both Africa and China face the formidable task of combating the COVID-19.
China cherishes the traditional friendship with Africa. No matter how the international landscape may evolve, China shall never waver in its determination to pursue greater solidarity and cooperation with Africa. I am convinced that humanity will ultimately defeat the virus and that the Chinese and African people are poised to embrace better days ahead.
The summit, held via video link, was jointly proposed by China, South Africa, the rotating chair of the African Union, and Senegal, the co-chair of the Forum on China-African Cooperation. Currently, Africa has over 250,000 confirmed infections of the coronavirus and more than 6,700 deaths. Although the number of infections in Africa is currently lower than elsewhere in the world, there is an expectation that the worst is still to come, with terrible social and economic consequences. For iAfrica News, I am Juldenjai Suare.
And from that report there filed in by Juldenjai Suare, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remaining of the story. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV, and now to the rest of the story. Now, Gambian authorities are putting measures in place to generate income from the multi-million-dollar International Conference Center in Banjul. The Ministry of Transport and the OIC secretariats in the country on Wednesday inaugurated an interim committee to administer affairs of the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara's International Conference Center as the country gears for the hosting of the 2022 OIC Summit. Let's have more details of that in this report. The Gambia government is bracing up for the utilization of the newly commissioned Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center. The state-of-the-art facility formed part of the Gambia's contribution to the hosting of the OIC Summit of head of states and governments in 2022 in Banjul. The center, with a capacity of more than 1,000 persons, was funded by the People's Republic of China at a tune of $50 million. The Ministry of Transport and Works and the OIC Gambia Secretariat on Wednesday inaugurated an interim body to eventually acquire the services of a permanent operation and management firm to steer the affairs of the center. The idea to utilize the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center for the purposes of business tourism was sounded by the founder of Tough Africa Global during the inauguration of the facility in February 2020.
ne maa ngay yaakaar ne conference center bi nañ commencé di ko utiliser di ko use fileeg conference bi di jot because conference yi nii benn bés la rek benn bés la bi tey ñaari bés te loolu 2022 fi mu booba ñaari at la am naa yaakaar ne xanaa dinañ nekk di jëriñoo lii nii ba pare ñu jóg jaay dëkk bi pour ñu am li ñoo ooyee conference tourism pour conférence yu mag yi nga xam ne ñoo ñëw si àddina si ñu ko indi fii parce que ñun ñàkkuñ ay hôtel ñàkkuñ ay yeneen place yoo xam ne mën nañ fay fee conférence soo seetee affaire tourisme Gambia fii ñun li xam mooy li ñoo ooyee ay package tours di ici ay touristes ñuy ñëw fii liñ dee fay si xaalis duy bari waaye koo xam ne da nga ñëw si conférence ay borom ndombo tànk lañ dee doon loolu dafa isi yokk suñ koom moo tax daal ñu ngi am yaakaar na ni ñu ko ubbee nii benn nañ ko toppatoo ñu toppatoo ko bu baax a baax jëfandikoo ko su ko defee daal du saa génne lim fi taxaw rek la waaye dina am lu mu yokk si suñu ay koom-koom.
Minister of Transport and Works by Lamin Diop is of the view that the Gambia government would ultimately run the International Conference Center as a business enterprise through a joint venture between the government and the private sector. The management of the Gambia OIC Secretariat is currently busy in the relocation of roadside vendors and other businesses to pave the way for the construction of public facilities ahead of the 2022 OIC Summit in the Gambia. The OIC Summit is the largest meeting attended by rulers and heads of states and governments where policy decisions are made to propel the objectives in the OIC Charter. The Gambia OIC Secretariat was established as a charitable organization under the Companies Act to coordinate the preparation for hosting of the OIC Heads of State Summit, scheduled for the Gambia in 2022. Reporting for Africa News, I am Amadou Kante. And from the report there, next we head to Tanzania because, of course, Tanzania has received more than $14 million from the International Monetary Fund as a debt relief for the country to be able to keep head over the COVID-19 pandemic. Authorities believe that the financial support would help to revive the Tanzania's development agenda, which was impeded by the global crisis. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Tanzania's development agenda is getting a serious boost. The country has received a slice of the $500 million in grant-based debt service relief offered to countries by the IMF. The IMF Catastrophe Containment and Relief Trust has offered Tanzania $14.3 million in relief to help rebuild its economy and combat the effects of COVID-19. Dr. Abbas Hassan says the government is planning to increase public health spending and execute other safety net programs to provide immediate relief to those most vulnerable.
Because now the disease is almost over, so containing it means you can improve some of the health facilities You can do some improvement on infrastructure, on the infrastructures that are health related. So these are kind of things I believe so many grants or loans or funds that will be coming into Tanzania under the COVID-19 terms will be used for.
The closure of the global aviation sector severely hurt key sectors like tourism and logistics for Tanzania. Tourism is a key sector for the country as it contributes 17.5% of the country's GDP. Dr. Omari Mbura says this has slowed the GDP growth.
And certainly the growth pace of 6% of the economy appeared to be slowing down to estimated 4%.
Structural reforms are critical to support economic recovery, and if done well, Tanzania could get additional relief covering the next 2-year period, subject to availability of resources in the relief package. This debt relief could potentially rise to $25.7 million over the next 23 months. Its aim is to help free up resources for emergency spending. But for Tanzania to be eligible for more funding under the plan, the money can only be used to reduce the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the country's economy. According to Finance Minister Philip Mpango, Tanzania was seeking as much as $272 million from the IMF's Rapid Credit Facility and is in talks with bilateral creditors about debt relief. But experts warn that proper management of the funds is key.
It should be possible, for example, one asking for some details on how money was spent to clearly channel expenditures in areas that were closely connected to the basis upon which the fund was asking for.
President Magufuli's government has plans to make Tanzania a middle-sized economy by 2025. But COVID-19 has had an impact on that goal. It is hoped that the relief from the IMF and loans from other financial institutions can help the country's economy get back on track.
From the report there in Tanzania, finally we head to DR Congo, because in Congo, citizens have demanded reparation from Belgium for atrocities committed by former Belgian colonial king in the country. The presence of a statue of the former king in Congo has further sparked anger among Congolese living in Belgium, calling for its removal. Well, historians say many Congolese were victimized during the king's rule, thus demanding for justice for his actions. Here's more details of that.
Relics of the DRC's colonial past still stand inside Kachachi in Kinshasa. The statue of Belgium's former king, Leopold II, has attracted the fury of many Congolese in Belgium. They have been demanding its removal for atrocities he committed during his reign as the sole owner of the Congo Free State between 1885 and 1909. Although the statue hasn't been pulled down in Kinshasa, it has whipped up anti-racism sentiments among many locals.
King Leopold II did very many bad things to our forefathers. He tortured us and killed our conscience. He even ordered his workers to cut off the hands of Congolese slaves who returned from the field without meeting the quota of rubber.
Historians estimate between 10 and 15 million Congolese were killed during his rule. It was only in 1908 that the Belgian government took over the administration of Congo from Leopold II. Former DRC President Mobutu Sese Seko removed the statue in 1967, but it now stands in this park in Kinshasa. Congolese citizens are calling for justice.
La réalité dans les faits est tout autre.
We appreciate that the Belgian authorities abolished slavery after their king tortured and killed millions of our people, but they haven't addressed the question of reparations. We are very frustrated that they haven't set up any project to recognize the suffering they subjected us to.
The colonial king's family still sits on the royal throne in Belgium. It's more than a century since King Leopold II died in Belgium, but calls for justice have been reignited across Europe and the DRC following the killing of African-American George Floyd by a white police officer in the US. Some Congolese believe the racism carried out by King Leopold II has contributed to the poverty and development challenges that the country is going through today.
The racism our ancestors experienced has left a bad legacy in our country. It has caused poverty, unemployment, and the discrimination among our people. It's really unfortunate.
Although there's been no report of violent protests in the DRC yet,
These young activists say they won't be deterred from demanding justice from the Belgian government over the killing of their compatriots.
And that report there in Kinshasa, Congo, finally brings this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, you can also log on our website on africa.tv. Once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.